How is it going, everybody? My name is DeMarco, and today we're taking an in-depth look at everything that we can find in the Starfield Gameplay Reveal. There's a ton of details, so I apologize in advance for the length of this video. I don't know how long it will be, but I do have a series of over 5 pages worth of notes of things that I spotted. Forewarning, we are going to be nitpicky. We're going to be analyzing details that during normal gameplay you might not find, as I took this frame by frame and tried to analyze absolutely everything. So that is your warning here for those comments that inevitably are going to come being, "You're too picky about everything." That is the point. So without further ado, let's take a look at the opening shots of Starfield, and it opens up showcasing actually one of my concerns about the game, which is just the pure emptiness, and I know that a lot of people are seeing the same thing. However, one feeling of comfort that I did reassure myself with is it does seem that individual locations are going to be hand-placed within these environments, although what might be disappointing to some fans is that the areas around that handcrafted spot, in this case it is the research laboratory that the player will work their way towards, does not have too much of interest to explore other than some resource gathering. So do with that what you will. But I would like to see, in some instances, a more traditional style map. What I found interesting was that in this year, 2330, and in this system, they do still use the soul date as their primary method of keeping time. Just a little bit of a window into the glimpse of the lore of this world. We do get to see the ship flying in from the distance. We are on the Crete, on the moon of the planet Encelon. As the ship does make its way towards the planet, I personally found this to be a pretty sure sign that it is in fact a pre-rendered scene, meaning you will not manually be landing your ship on planet surfaces, although that is not yet confirmed. Our first look into the scene shows us Vasco, a companion that we already know of and we've seen in previous Starfield footage. We also get our first look at what I assume is going to be the final version of the heads-up display, and it's surprisingly minimal, in fact pleasantly minimal, but also loaded with detail, and we're going to explore some of those details of the HUD elements later on. But for now, you do have your health bar, the weapon selection, as well as your ammo and grenade count, and then on top of that, the oxygen and CO2 meter, which actually doubles as your stamina bar. In fact, I think it might only be the stamina bar, not sure how much oxygen comes into play, the name of the planet, the time of day. This little white marker in the bottom here signals the direction that you're looking, with north being up here, and then any points of interest. This little symbol here, I speculate, is your primary quest location, although that is unconfirmed. What I really did like about this, in a surprisingly little detail, is the fact that you can actually see through the windows in these shots. In previous Bethesda games, you often couldn't. It would be some kind of fixed glass or just non-clear glass that you couldn't see through. But here you can, and it actually alludes to something that we'll see later on, which is confirmation that there are seemingly no loading screens when you're on a planet, which is pretty cool indeed. Also take note of Vasco's shadow, highlighting some incredible lighting in the new Creation Engine 2 as he walks down the ramp here.
According to the scanners, the abandoned research facility is in this direction.
When the player, opens up their scanning device, they are able to see various different elements, including a change in the heads-up display. We now see additional details about the planet's surface. It's 7 degrees in temperature, there's 1% oxygen, and 0.55 gravity, which will come into play later. We also can highlight specific interesting plants and scan those for more information. And notice when you change to this mode, your weapon turns to the cutter, which is a piece of mining equipment that doubles as a weapon. We'll see that later on in the trailer. Now, what confused me here was the way that this specific survey system worked. I'm not sure what the 66.6 would imply. However, you do have 5 out of 8 resources found and 0 out of 2 flora found. That right there, a total of 10, which is where you get the current biome being 50% and the scan range 50 meters. So it could be presumed that this is not all the resources that are on the planet, but rather within your 50-meter scan range. I'm not sure where the 66.6% comes from, but perhaps you need to scan multiple of individual plants before you can survey the entire thing. What's also interesting next is that you have an individual 13% scanned for the flora itself, the dust root, 13% scanned flora, as well as, which doesn't equal what you see here for a total of 50%, so maybe this means you've just scanned 13% of the dust roots in the area, but then Crete survey data added 50%, but we don't see any of these display elements change. It'll be interesting to see the variety of insects and non-hostile creatures that we get on some of the planet surfaces, including those bugs previously. And we do get confirmation, not that it should come as a surprise, of third-person gameplay. Now, these creatures are called Crete Stalkers. This particular one is level 1, and this is how the enemy's health works, which is pretty nice and pretty clean. And if you are a fan of having the health bars at the top, I am no doubt sure that mods will come out that let you do that. I'm curious to see if you would have attacked those creatures if all of them would have jumped out and attacked you as a pack, but since the player did not engage, they went passively. Once again, something interesting here is that the scan range has increased to 10,000 meters. However, the number of resources here has not changed, so I'm not sure what's going on with this element. We are now using the cutter, which does have its own ammo count. As I said, it doubles as a weapon. Also notice that the exact range to your quest location grows when you get into this menu, and here you can identify elements, how far they are, and you can mine them with your cutter. On the bottom here, which I didn't point out earlier, you do have Outpost for 30, which I believe this means you currently have the resources to build 30 outposts. You do have a photo mode, which is now confirmed. Toggle guide, which I'm not 100% on what that guide might be. And then, of course, back out of this scanning mode. You also get a notification in the top right corner that says iron added when you do collect resources. When you do discover locations, you get it does notify you. So this is the Crete Research Lab, as we are on the moon of Crete. You also gain XP for discovering locations, something that is in Fallout, but not necessarily in the Elder Scrolls. Now, when he does change to the cutter tool once again, I did notice that there is some clipping between his jetpack on the back here. Not a big deal, probably won't notice that too much, and in fact, maybe it is just the angle, but I thought it was worth pointing out. You also do have unique ships. This one in particular is called a Ghost, so I'm curious as to whether or not that's due to the frame that it uses. From what we understand, different ships have different frames that you then build out onto, but this one is a Ghost, so multiple ships are there. The weapon animation and reload animations look great, and we actually see the gravity come into play as he's able to not only jump higher, but noticeably doesn't take any damage from that fall. Now, notice that there were no loading screens as a player enters into the base. It's completely seamless, which I know players have been asking for in Bethesda games for quite some time. The new weapon that we have here is called the Grendel. It has a magazine of 50 shots, and actually, I did want to say the detail on just the ammo counter alone, it does accurately change numbers. So if we go back before he does the reload, you can see 47 here, and then as soon as he pulls it back in, you all can also see the brand here. It is a Compotech brand rifle. I do like the way they integrate the companies that are in the game into the weapon, so it feels like everything was manufactured and made by a real company, a real entity. Once again, the lighting here is absolutely gorgeous. There is a biohazard level 1, which will come into play later on in the gameplay demo, but do take notice of the biohazard sign. Now, you can hear there's conversation going on between these pirates to hold someone off here, presumably you, and while the main villain that we'll see for this location is on the roof setting something up. Some kind of creature here, presumably what is considered to be the biohazard, is locked up here, and something that I think we'll actually get a closer look at later on. Now, this pirate here is level 2. It's interesting that he's just named Pirate. They don't have any code names. However, I do speculate that there is, in fact, a hierarchy system in Starfield as to how the enemies work. It's what we've seen previously, and there is evidence of that later on. A lot of folks have complained as we take our first shots that the enemy does not actually flinch or react at all. It is a bit unfortunate, but I do think that's solely because he was coming out of the animation, because as we see with this shot, not only does he react accordingly, you can see there's blood coming from specifically his shoulder, but he also falls in that direction. So there is some level of reactivity going on with the shots that you take. I am very, very happy about that. Also notice as we get into this segment, I do not want to leave this out, that the compass does change to accurately reflect the situation that you're in. So previously, before we approach these enemies, it is white. As we get detected by opening fire on them, it becomes red. Presumably, there is also going to be some kind of a yellow, as traditional in Bethesda games, you have searching, detected, and hidden. So I presume white, some other color, and then red. You can also see where the enemies are located. Hopefully, that's an option to turn off. Also, more enemies do come into play. So there's a 2 here, 3, 4, and then there's 2 over here. Also worth noting the little indicator on the top right there saying that you can quick loot enemies similar to what you could do in Fallout 4. So there's a total of 6 enemies in this encounter. Hopefully, we begin to see encounters that have more enemies at once. Usually, Bethesda games have to limit them just so they can't have too much going on. Now, in this scene, I actually did notice a lighting bug. I do have to take this frame by frame, as you can see how brightly this sharp line going across, but as the player does round this corner, it does actually snap to being darker in the next frame. This is usually a problem with the creation engine where only so many light sources can handle at a time. If you speak to modders, they can tell you more about the light sources. However, I did find this to be interesting, and I'm curious as to how dramatically the lighting will come into play with bugs such as this. There is a combat slide that the player is able to do as they sprint into this encounter. And once again, you will see him react to the shots at multiple points, where he to the left a little bit and to the right a little bit. Honestly, very, very well done with some of the physics that are going on here. Once this grenade does go off, you see the explosion. You'll also see, and he goes ragdolling off to the side, which is fun to watch. You'll also notice, if you pay attention, there is actually a small animation in which the player does flinch in reaction to the explosion. You see his hand comes off the gun. Maybe his aim gets staggered a little bit. We don't have any kind of a cursor to showcase that, but the player does get flinched, and we'll actually see this again later on in the trailer when we're getting attacked melee by certain creatures. You do have a style of HUD similar to what we've gotten before, where you in Fallout 4, where you can select which weapon you want. What I found interesting was this symbol in particular here. I suspect that this is the amount of damage that you do. So not only can we see the weapon and the ammo count, which he's going to switch to the Coachman shotgun, one of my favorite weapons that we see in the game, but also what I assume is the damage amount here. So weapon cases, you do have this lockpick system, and I think I figured out exactly how it works. So if you notice in this first frame here, he actually cycles between the digipicks that they have. You have a total of 15 digipicks and 3 types of inputs that you can use, and the goal is to slot these in, use the right one to slot into the areas that they fit to close off these gaps. Now, I'll note there is also an undo key down here, of which it's interesting. There's 15 digipicks, but 14 unlocks. So there you go. But essentially, you have to pick the right one and then align them. The reason why there is an undo button is, say you used the wrong digipick. Say you tried to put in this digipick to the previous layer that you have, and then on harder locks, you might find out, wait, I actually need this one for this layer. So that's why you're able to go between the different layers with this undo button. So they'll pick the right ones, slot them into the places they belong, and then you're able to open these safes. And you find an Equinox rifle. What's interesting is that you can immediately equip the weapons. This one is the Equinox, and you do get XP for picking locks. This whiteboard here says experimental analysis of selected clone cells. Now, this is the creature that I suspect were in the tanks that we saw earlier, but I also believe that we get to see a very close look at this creature later on. So keep an eye out for that. This is actually one of my favorite moments in the trailer, because we do get to see probably one of the most interesting little bits of physics that I think anybody is going to notice in this trailer, which is, if we fast forward a bit, he's aiming, we're shooting at this enemy. The accuracy is quite a bit all over the place, but what you'll notice is the bin that we hit, not only does the whole bin come off, but the lid actually separates, meaning this is two separate elements, which goes to show, one of the things Todd Howard mentioned is how things are interactable. You can pick things up in their environments, and the fact that these have two separate physics, I thought was quite interesting. Now, if we do actually take this a few frames back and get a little bit lucky, you can actually see in certain sections that the bullets actually do have an impact, where it does kick up a cloud of smoke when you do fire bullets at the enemies. I thought that was a nice little detail. Also, your quest marker does adjust to one small step as the ship then comes that does pull in. So you do get to see some quest updates. Now, what I will also point out here is the compass has changed quite a bit, where you can actually see new symbols on the compass down here. Not quite sure what each of them are. This one is a structure. We actually will see this later on when we're looking at the planetary view. Not sure what these other two might be. And again, your primary location, your primary quest marker. What I thought was interesting about this in particular is when we were looking at the panning shots in the beginning of the showcase, there actually wasn't really any locations around. So I'm curious if these have something to do with what's inside the building. When we saw the outpost from the outside, it is really, really large. So maybe there's multiple points of interest inside singular buildings. Or perhaps there's just a lot more to do, even though these opening shots made it seem like it was a bit emptier than it actually is. You do have liquefied helium in this container, helium-3, which I thought was pretty interesting. And on top of that, we do have Combatech rifle, that is the Equinox rifles made by Combatech. I love this shot. They clearly pointed out that there is some forms of locational damage. Now, users have pointed out that this gentleman seems to just be running in a strange direction. It's worth noting, that I believe they had him purposely scripted so that they could demonstrate exactly that with the jetpack going off. But if we do take enough frames back, you'll actually see that it does snap between different segments. Here, we're in combat. And here it seems as though we are not. So I thought that was really interesting. Some clever splicing, but not quite was able to spot it. And again, I think that was just so they could showcase that glorious moment. It's interesting that his body didn't eviscerate into paste the way we might see in Fallout, but there you go. We then get to see a boost. He's now using the Maelstrom SMG, but also the jetpack on his back does have a boost meter that comes up. I did see some early discussion on Reddit saying that maybe it's tied to your CO2 meter. It is not. Your jetpack does have its own fuel source. Also, if we do take a couple steps back, there is something that I wanted to note. Here, once again, it is a seamless transition as we walk into the open environment. On the right-hand side, you do have a United Colonies terminal, so pirates did take this over, but this was previously a United Colonies testing facility, and you do have that seamless walkthrough into the open environment. Our next shots begin on the planet of Jemison. Once again, they do not show in any capacity the player landing or taking part in the landing sequence. Instead, it is this automated cutscene. Now, I wanted to stop here because I have scanned this trailer many times, and I'm not going to go frame by frame here, but trust me, I have, and I was not able to find any sort of pop-in from any of these buildings, the plants, the trees, the distant terrain, nothing, which is incredible. And I have a hunch that a lot of this has to deal with some of the upgrades they made from Fallout 76 and processing distant terrain due to the fact that that was a multiplayer game. So it does look really, really great. And just to highlight the expansiveness of the city, one, the scale of the buildings, they almost appear double or, at least 50% larger than the buildings that we saw in Fallout 4 minimum, but it's nice to see buildings of the scale. I wonder how many of them and how much of them you can actually explore through. I anticipate that it will be a little bit limited, but also you can see NPCs way tiny down in the corner here before the camera starts panning out, but as the camera does continue, you'll notice that it goes all the way to the back here, just showcasing how massive these cities in Starfield have become. This one in particular is New Atlantis on the planet of Jemison, but I was blown away when I was able to see just how large some of these cities are going to be, and we'll see further evidence of that later on. I also love seeing each of the NPCs in mostly full detail, still doing all their animations. They're not standing here statically, they're not waiting to pop in when the camera gets closer. All of them are present. Now, this was a very interesting scene because we're able to see a couple key items here. This sign is telling you that you need passports for interplanetary travel, meaning that even within the United Colonies, or maybe this is going to places that the Freestar Collective might control, as we know, they are in a uneasy peace since the colony wars that took place before the events of the game. So not sure where you need an interplanetary passport in order to travel to, but they are required in the universe of Starfield. It's a shame passports haven't gotten away yet, haven't found a more efficient system. The year is also, well, actually not the year, but the United Colonies was established in 2161. Now, Starfield takes place in the year 2330, so the United Colonies have been around for 169 years, which is pretty interesting for all of you lore junkies. There's also, of course, hotel and shopping. Did I just notice a character pop in? Their hair does. So this is actually the only little pop-in that I've noticed in the entire gameplay, and trust me when I say when you play, you will never notice that. Now, I did also like the variety and quantity of NPCs, far surpassing anything that we've seen in past Bethesda games. There are also children in the game. We did see some of that through the concept art, but also the variety of actions they're taking. Well, yes, most of them are walking around. This gentleman over here is crouching. This gentleman over here is just very curious about something. Who knows? This is a very interesting shot. All of them are interesting shots. I apologize if I keep repeating that. But here we have SSNN. I'm not 100% on what SSNN is, so I apologize if other people do. Perhaps you could let me know in the comments section below. But we do have some faction flags over here with the United Colonies in particular. These grunts, these military people right here, they are actually part of the United Colonies security. What I did find interesting was that they have these wires, at least this individual here has these wires that are going through his outfit. One looks as though it's getting plugged into his gun, but it's actually not. I assume that these are somehow jetpack because they are tied to their jetpacks back here, but I'm not quite sure what these pipes might be leading to. You can also see that they are using the the Equinox assault rifles or Equinox SMGs as well. The player actually uses their watch. It says identifying single and the Constellation logo. Hold up to access, and then it will open the door for the player. But take note of this symbol right here. It will come into play in just a bit. This is the watch that players are suspecting will be obtainable if you purchase the collector's edition of Starfield. There, once again, there's that sun symbol, and in this area of prominence seems to probably be what I suspect is the founder of Constellation. Now, Constellation is all about exploring the mystery of the galaxies, no doubt taking inspiration from explorers of the past, whether they were space explorers or, in some cases, naval explorers, the first adventurers to travel across the world. We actually have multiple boat objects across this room. The facial animations, my god, amazing. Such an improvement from what we've seen in the past. It's amazing to see how far Bethesda has come with their facial capture. I'm really happy to see it, and I can't wait to see what some of their future games look like if they keep improving it. There's also subtle hair physics that do go on as she moves, which is a new pleasant change from past Bethesda games where the hair would always simply be static. We also have a shot of Vasco. As we know, he came in here with us, but I do like the little things that are dangling. Some other, most likely prominent Constellation members, and I'm not 100% sure what this device might be. It does look like some kind of maybe model, but honestly, it almost appears as though there's a small needle on the end. Perhaps some of you can help to illuminate what you think this object might be, and that one as well while we're at it. Here's another ship model in the background, so they're, explorers. Like early pioneers. The skyboxes have very noticeably improved. These artifacts are quite interesting, and they are the key to unlocking everything when it comes to Starfield. These artifacts are presumably from some kind of alien species that are either we're trying to find or hold the secrets to the universe. That is the mystery that we're trying to uncover, and Bethesda did a good job of not spoiling that all the way up until this point, what it might be. Now, you'll notice that there's actually some runes etched into these artifacts. I suspect that it will either create some kind of map when all these pieces are put together, or perhaps it will create some kind of key to unlock something. But if we look at one of the earlier teaser trailers that we've received for Starfield, the earliest gameplay trailer we have, or in-game trailer, excuse me, you'll notice that these are actually tied to different Greek alphabet letters. At least that's how humanity and Constellation are seemingly trying to discern these as some kind of language. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens when we collect all of these pieces, but they are tied to the main artifact that we have seen previously. There also is some kind of Mass Effect type beacon entity going on here. As the player approaches this object, he reaches out and then he gets subjected to these visions. Now, during this moment, the narrator in the background is explaining what these artifacts are and what they are building.
Everything we've been looking for.
Take a listen.
As to what they are, what they're building. You'll be part of solving that puzzle now.
So specifically, they say, as to what they are, what they're building. They're implying an alien species. So clearly, these artifacts are not human. They're coming from somewhere else. And it leads me to believe that the plot of this game is going to be discovering alien life in the galaxy. All those other things that Todd Howard has talked about in the past, such as religion, which we do get a glimpse of in this gameplay trailer, those are all present, but primarily it's going to be about finding alien life in this universe.
So, you found something?
The new guy found it.
You dug up the artifact, right? That means you saw it. The visions?
Here's another allusion to visions. Again, it really is clearly inspired either by 2001: A Space Odyssey, you can look at some of the artifacts in that movie, or very possibly Mass Effect with finding these artifacts. Now, what he says is, you were the one who dug it up. That would imply that you start the game as a miner. I fully expect that you start the game as a miner. We're going to see evidence of that later on, and in fact, it is stated in the Steam description, so that was quite interesting. Previously, there was speculation that maybe this game has multiple starts to the game. It seems as though that will not be the case. It's going to take place in a controlled environment. Now, this city is Aquila. We get a good look at Aquila and just the scale of this city as well. If you look at some shots that we have from Aquila versus Windhelm, a city that we've seen in Skyrim, the difference is night and day. Another environment, there's over 1,000 planets, so not sure what this planet is, and there's actually really nothing of note here except for the environment itself, showcasing the diversity, the number 8 here, but that doesn't seem important. The most notable thing is his backpack has changed, or rather his jetpack has changed. It's much larger, so I assume that if you want more boost, you're going to have to equip yourself with heavier gear, meaning you get to perform more actions like that, but it's going to weigh you down. Now, this Paradiso is actually not in the city of New Atlantis, as some might think. Paradiso is actually possibly a Divine Comedy reference, and the Divine Comedy deals with how Dante fits in with the gods. So you're seeing some inspiration coming from other places, even in the names of the buildings. I'm curious to see how the Paradiso plays out in Starfield and what exact relation it might have to that reference.
Scattered across the galaxy.
This is a look into the planet of Neon. You could see the ebbed ceiling in the beginning, which is very reminiscent of the concept art that we've gotten in the past. There's multiple different businesses here. You have Reliant Medical on the side. You also have the Vol Hotel, which these may or may not play large or minor roles. But what I found most interesting, if I can line up the shot properly, is actually a small piece of graffiti that appears in this scene. This one right here that states, "They are coming." Now, who is coming? I suspect this is either a religious cult in the game, as we know multiple religions will play a role, but also this could be reference to the aliens that we haven't seen, but we're still trying to discover. Maybe those are the ones that they're alluding to as coming. We see that another SSN. Again, it's near the spaceport, which is the exact location that we were at last time on New Atlantis, so still not sure what SSN might be. There's a medical center on the side. I assume this is still Neon, but you can see the underground of Neon and just how diverse the planets will be, or the cities will be in and of themselves. Possibly have almost multiple biomes if you think about it, with this being some kind of underground, the above ground being the scene we saw before, and multiple others. There's also a little skull piece of graffiti up here. I suspect maybe that's referring to the Crimson Pirates, but I'm not quite sure. I really found this portrait in the back interesting. This is obviously some kind of important location or shop, but these I thought previously were some kind of binary codes. It does say 0110010, and then on top of that, once the camera pans a bit closer, didn't want to go too far like I just did, but once the camera does get a little bit closer, you can actually see that these kind of look like silhouettes of people. So perhaps this is some kind of neural network type place. Maybe there's some kind of implants that you can have in your head, similar to Cyberpunk, or you can just share consciousness, similar to the memory den that we had in Fallout 4. Not 100%, but definitely something to keep an eye out when you're visiting Neon. Couple shops here. You have Roland Arms. This is in the city of Aquila. You also have, if we wind it back just a hair, you have Shepherd's, which is maybe some kind of junk store. Not quite sure, but it does look like the stuff outside isn't exactly what a space adventurer like yourself might need unless you're trying to scrap it. Roland Arms in the back, but I do want to again just point out the comparison. If you look at a, say, Whiterun City Street or a Windhelm City Street compared to what you have going on here, the density of NPCs, the amount of activity, the liveliness, how full the city is, I mean, it's at least, just this shot alone, you can see more than twice the size of any of the previous cities we've gotten before. So I'm really happy to see the expansion. This is the last time I'm going to bring it up, but it is a pleasant improvement. The player's walking towards this building, so just in editing, it seems as though the continuation of this shot, the next scene we'll see is going to be in this building. They do still use neon signs if that's of any interest to people. You could see with the open sign here, but just something I noticed and worth pointing out. This is some kind of collector, which I thought was interesting, looking at the juxtaposition between either this Greek or Roman statues mixed with this Ming Dynasty statue back here. This merchant, perhaps, also has an artifact of their own that's on display, and we're walking towards this gentleman. Not sure if he's the one that we're going to meet in a bit, or if he's somebody else of some probable significance. You also have another object on display over here, so clearly some kind of collector. I do want to take a quick step back to this scene here. On the rug, there's a couple of things of interest. Can't quite tell what most of these are, but you do have the American flag on the bottom here. I wonder if that carpet has something to do with, again, some of the relics that are being collected. There's another one in the back here. Now, this character seems to be a reference to the real-life Salvador Dali. You can pull up side-by-side images, and the similarities are uncanny. Salvador Dali was also a collector of weird objects, so it makes sense that we're getting to see him here. Also, I did want to point out just once again the lighting, the reflection on his armor, but also the way it lights off the cloth. How you can see it naturally diffuses back to the purple that it's supposed to be as it goes further down. So great job there. The way it hits his face as well, you can see this part, the orange glow kind of coming on this side of the face. So the lighting was done incredibly, and that's one of the big improvements for the creation engine too. He mentions that the object spoke to him, once again reinforcing the idea that the obelisks and these artifacts are some kind of Mass Effect beacon type entity. We got our first look at some of the Crimson Pirates. We had a good, nice close-up shot there, but also as they run in, we can see that this individual has a golden skull mask. Now, the skull was the same as the graffiti we saw before, so clearly Crimson Pirates, skulls make sense, but also this indicates that there's a visual hierarchy that players will be able to see in game. Now, it's unsure whether or not this person will be unique in any other way besides the golden skull mask. Usually in Bethesda games, he would just be a tougher enemy with more damage, more armor, and more health. So we'll see if it plays out in a similar way, but it would be nice if he had some kind of unique elements to him, whether it's a weapon or a tactic or something like that.
Follow the rules. Agree to work for you.
There's also a little bug. I did say that I was going to be nitpicky, right? So if we go a couple scenes back, there is a visual bug. Sorry, Sistef man, we will get to you shortly. But if you pay attention to this man firing his rifle, now I'm not a firearms expert, but you can see that not only does the bullet come from behind his gun, but also the muzzle flash after a good bit comes out. So I'm not sure if that's accurate to how ballistics fire, but just something that I did notice.
Agree to work for UC System. Together.
This gentleman with his works for UC Systef, and this is probably his headquarters here that I'm going to go off on a limb and say is based out of New Atlantis, which we know is the capital of the United Colonies, or the main city of the United Colonies. You can actually see that same little arrow logo here on this gentleman's armor. Now, we've heard a lot about the detail in this game. Todd Howard mentioned how all the details are important, all the buttons on the ship have a purpose, and we actually get to see some of that here as I looked closely at each of these monitors, with none of them repeating any information. Every single screen on all of these displays are completely unique, even the ones up here if I look closely. Maybe there's some repetition. I imagine not every single one, but I didn't spot it when I looked through for a bit. So that was incredibly impressive to see. The level of detail continues throughout the whole trailer, from what's on the weapons to even some pipes that we'll be taking a look at later on.
We take down these cutthroat pirates.
We do get to see our companion here using this laser rifle as a weapon, the cutter, as it would. So it's cool that it could serve both purposes.
We're not just here to shoot the bad guys. We're peace.
That's our first look outside of Aquila City, which, again, just highlighting it over older cities is quite impressive. Even the concept art alone, to see how much it's changed since some of those images have been drawn. You'll notice that here it says established 2167 by Solomon Coe, I think. 2167 is actually 6 years after the United Colonies were established. So it's still newer. It's still old, but it's still newer than the United Colonies, and it does give us a look into some of the lore. So presumably all of these people came here together, something happened, and then you had this splinter group that came out as the Freestar Collective that exists now, housed within Aquila. we get to see their leader. We don't see much of him, but I do like the juxtaposition of some of the outfits, his included, between New Atlantis to Neon to now Aquila, how the wide variety of clothes that we'll be able to use. This building is inside the rock. I'm going to assume that this is the main headquarters for the Freestar Collective, but we also do get our first look at what I think is the Ashta. The Ashta were actually the first creatures we heard about in Starfield through the location insights videos that was described as a velociraptor and a wolf. Now, it does have the wolf-like qualities of velociraptor, maybe not so much, but I'm just throwing out a guess here. Also, it says feeding the front lines with this gigantic beast, so perhaps do these creatures serve as defense? Maybe they're friendly. We're going to see one later on in the trailer. It would be cool if you get to make one of these a pet. I would absolutely love that. So I'm not sure what feeding the front lines exactly, but I just thought that was worth pointing out.
Our collective. When you sign up with the Crimson Fleet.
Another look into the Crimson Fleet. Once again, on the board over there, we get the large skull. You know, it's just all over the place with these guys. They love skulls. This is probably a pre-rendered cutscene, which is pretty cool still. But there is really, what I was a bit disappointed in is the fact that there's no blood after he takes a shot, at least that I was able to see. At one point, I did notice, however, that the bullet does actually go through this character, which is pretty nice detail, but no blood comes out after the shot. We do get to see some anti-gravity gameplay. You can control the gravity on your ship, I believe, so that's kind of cool, and we'll see how that comes into play. And this does actually look like it's combat taking place inside of a ship based on the cargo nets holding everything in place, so that was really, really neat, and it does look good. I love that the shells are coming out and just floating around as he does fire his gun. They're not falling, just, again, small little attentions to detail. Another brand new creature. This is a new weapon we haven't seen before. New creature. He looks awesome. I'm excited to see which ones they have to offer and this snowy landscape. But again, just noticing here we probably have some kind of mineral that can be mined. Of course, the flora that I'm sure we could scan. But not really much else going on in some of these shots. So alluding to some of the emptiness that we get on the planets. There is now a laser scope on this weapon though. Part of the weapon customization that we get. This, I suspect, is a creature that we saw, the one that had the cell experiments going on with it. I thought he looked absolutely terrifying as he comes and charges. You can see his massive teeth. It almost looks like his legs here are kind of like skulls in a way. But he lunges at the creature. But this actually gives us a new, just the amount of detail in some of this scene. If we could get the shot lined up right, you could actually see that this is pipe number 1370, and this pipe is number 5309. So even the pipes are labeled accurately to how they might be in a building such as this. So when I say there's an insane amount of detail, here's further proof of that.
But we are not stopping.
This is where I believe that you'll start the game, and I think many others have come to the same conclusion at this point. This laser seems to be digging for more of the artifacts as the main narrator, the Constellation narrator, the female, comes back to talking about some stuff. You see the laser drilling through, and then you get these guys, and I believe that you'll probably start off as one of these folks. They're all using the cutters, which makes sense why you would know how to use it.
Don't even make it this far.
Not sure if these guys will be big parts of the story, but they do work for this mining company that we'll actually see later on. Another museum, two museums or two collections in one gameplay trailer. This sign up here says NASA, so there is evidence of the solar system. Of course, you have the history of spaceflight and this United States capsule back here. It's pretty neat. This is probably something based in NASA as well. I apologize, I did not look this up. I probably should have. Didn't look up what this structure was, but it's probably one of our early kind of things that we've landed onto either the moon or Jupiter or Mars or something like that. Another brand new creature. This is the one that we saw in the poster from earlier. Again, he doesn't seem hostile, so I hope that you can tame him in some way or befriend him in some way. That would be neat. The player isn't going up to him with his gun raised either, but the floor is also pretty nice. A little close to home. We see in a lot of these shots that some of the flora that we get on the planets is pretty familiar and comfortable. I'm looking forward to the more alien ones, so hopefully we get a wide variety in that regard. And there is quite a wide variety. This section here, if it looks familiar, then it absolutely should, because this is similar to what we got in the original teaser trailer. The artifact, that structure that we're trying to unlock, that we're trying to figure out what it is, this is seemingly it. And inside of it, we will have this device, which also is fairly reminiscent to what we've seen before. And in the background, the Constellation narrator is explaining it will change humanity forever. So this, I think, is a key to finding alien life in the galaxy. We've been searching for a long time. The year is 2330. We haven't found them yet, so now we finally have the opportunity to do so. Just want to point out a couple things that I missed along the way. One in particular, we do have this unseen rifle before here on the floor, further showcasing the weapon variety, and also a different kind of jetpack. So I do like the different amounts of equipment that you can equip. Also, I had not mentioned it previously, but again, a new pistol that we haven't yet seen before. So lots of weapons that are available in Starfield. And of course, that's even further with the customization that we're going to see in just a little bit. So now we get into some of the character customization aspects of the game, and a lot of this you can sort of see for yourself, so I really don't want to spend too much time here, but just for the sake of being thorough, this is Argos Extractors, and this is presumably, you have a Nautilus outfit, once again another company that appears, but interestingly, I do think that this is further evidence of where you begin the game as a miner. You happen to be the individual of all those miners. You are the lucky one that finds the artifact that then speaks to you, which makes you a special character in this universe. Also, it's worth noting that you can change your look after you create your character during the game. So something that's a nice addition. We don't have to wait for some kind of mod to allow you to do that, or DLC. A wide variety of character types. You even can change your walk style, which they were sure to highlight. It's just further shows how they're expanding. Some character creators regress. This character creator seems to improve from past iterations, and I'm happy to see that. I do like that there's a large variety of different styles and colors. You could see when they do actually move some of these sliders, how it does move in comparison. We don't have an accurate number, but they jump from 1 to 19, and that's not even halfway there. So there's more than 19 hairstyles that you can go through, which is great. Next up are the backgrounds. We're in the background section of the character creator, and I'm really happy that there's, so many. We don't see all of them here, but there's a large variety that you can choose from, and each of them provides you different starting skills. So I think that you can unlock these skills through normal gameplay when you do level up, but you can at least begin with some of them. And the interesting thing about it is that other characters in the game will reference you based on the background you pick, and I'm sure that it will go further than just being recognized, probably lead to unique dialogue options, probably leads to unique solutions and routes that you can take and things that you can talk about. So I'm excited to see how much of a role backgrounds get to play into it.
You'll pick a background that gives you...
A lot of them are pretty standard, if I'm being honest. The most interesting one, and it's something that we've seen in past Bethesda games, but you see 30 points of health, 10% more damage, additional research recipes available, increased character capacity, more damage, these sorts of things. We've seen them before. Persuasion, right? So that's why I'm not going to spend too much time here. There are turrets in the game and robots that are presumably going to be hostile, so that's going to be interesting to see. We've got a couple robots in the gameplay trailer, but Vasco being one of them, but nothing that's actually attacking you so far. It's only been humans. The most interesting here, again, we have seen this before, but diplomacy, forcing a target below your level to stop fighting for a while. It's not permanent pacification, but it is temporary one. So if you're in a bit of a tight spot, you can probably try to use this to your advantage.
Says here you spend some time as a diplomat. Having a way with words might prove useful.
And it is recognized by other characters. So a couple of the traits that we can go through now, and we're going to take the time to read through each of them. If you've seen these before, feel free to skip ahead a little bit, or if you've watched somebody else covered. Now, traits are cool because they offer both positive and negative quirks to your character. For example, with introvert, you really need alone time. You have more endurance when adventuring alone, but less with other human companions. You can still bring Vasco along, but not other humans. That negates, you can see here, you can no longer take extrovert, which is presumably the exact opposite, and one that I would look at. Alien DNA, I know a lot of people are trying to speculate that, oh, aliens, but I do in fact think that this doesn't mean alien, sentient, intelligent aliens. I think this means just animalistic aliens, the native species to some of these planets, some of them hostile, some of them passive, but non-intelligent that we've seen so far. Kid stuff is one of my favorites. It's a good Pokemon reference thrown in there as we scroll back a little bit. Your parents are alive and well, and you can visit them at their home, but 10% of the money you earn is deducted and automatically sent to them. So I have no idea what role your parents are going to play, but they do play some kind of a role. Neon Street Kid, you gain access to special dialogue options and better rewards from missions specifically on Neon. It can't be combined with any other faction allegiance trait. Crime bounty by other factions is greatly increased. So when you do get bounties, the crime and bounty system in the game is present. I like that. I'm glad it is. And it does seem as though it's going to be based on the faction that you piss off. So if you annoy the United Colonies, you'll get a bounty from them. The Freestar Collective from them. Neon seems to have its own. We're not quite sure who Neon is controlled by. I think it's independent. It was formed by a mining company, if I remember correctly, or a fishing company that formed the city. So each of these locations have their own governments and they react accordingly. So if you need to get away from the law, you can go to a place controlled by a different faction. Raised Enlightened and Raised Universal are opposites, so no need to go back to the one that was skipped over. They contradict one another, but you grew up as a member of Sanctum Universum. You gain a significant discount at the church store, but lose access to the Enlightened store. So these are some of the religions. Todd Howard talked about in the past how religions are important to Starfield, and we get to see some of them here. You could even be part of one as one of your traits, but they also have unique stores that you gain access to. And I thought that was more interesting than just the fact that you have religions. Now, whether or not you need discounts to a specific store, that's up to you, but there you go. That's one of the traits you can pick. I think some of these might be a little bit more interesting. The Great Serpent, yet another religion that's available in Starfield. This interestingly provides boosts to grav jumping, which is basically Starfield's version of light speed, if I'm correct, and doing that frequently gives you health and endurance. But they can't if you don't continue jumping regularly. Again, this doesn't mean actual jumping, it means grav jumping. So it is a little bit like an addiction, and this is another religion because it can't be combined. So I guess you can't use it with either of these. Pretty interesting. Spaced means that you do have bonuses when you're in space. I'm not sure if when it says when you're on the surface, it means on maybe a meteor, or if you're literally fighting in space, like the health and endurance, if people could board your ship, if you could board their ships. We saw a little bit of ship-to-ship combat or boarding ship combat earlier, so curious to see how that plays out. And then there's the opposite, terra firma, which will give you bonuses on the surface. So it does seem like there's a large focus on some of that space stuff that's going on up there. Starter home, you get your own home, but you have a bit of a mortgage to pay off. Wide variety of outfits, just a variety of gear that you can wear and things that are unique to the type of character that you want to roleplay as. I love to see it. It honestly, some of the most I've seen in a Bethesda game to date. Now I'm going to pause right here. You do have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different skill trees, and there's roughly about 80 skills that are going to be in the game. If you just kind of tally up how many are in each tree, multiply it by the 5 different trees that you have, you're looking about 80 skills in the game, and you get to start off with only 3 of them. So that is pretty cool. What I am curious to see is exactly how many of these you can unlock throughout the game. So the way leveling up basically works, and we'll spend a little bit of time here, but effectively you have to first invest a point into a skill you want to unlock. You then can progress in them by completing challenges. So if they do hover over, for example, that one right there, which is the magazines, rapid reloading, you have to reload 150 empty magazines to get to part 4 out of 4 in order to progress. So these aren't some kind of ridiculous challenges where you need to do 360 no scope with your eyes closed while simultaneously getting rammed by some creature on a planet. Nothing absolutely absurd. They're things that you would do normally. For example, ballistics. You get extra damage. You need to just kill enemies with ballistic weapons, plain and simple. Now, it's not just that you unlock it, you do have to you rank up, you spend your skill point, as you saw that one depleted, they got the rank. So you need both a skill point as well as the prerequisites from the challenges, and honestly, it is a fantastic hybrid between the past systems that they've used in other Bethesda games. Here's a biohazard level 3, so there's a lot of dangerous materials in this place, but we get to see some of the crafting. It is nice to see that all of these have been boiled down into just one crafting bench, as opposed to previously where everything was individual and you had to go to each of those benches, so that's cool. It does seem as though these are going to take time to complete. It's not just instantaneous as it would have been in, say, Fallout or other, like Skyrim, when you could just craft armor. It seems as though you need to spend a little bit more time. This does say available projects. I don't believe that this is the maximum number of things that you can get, more simply just the ones that you have available to you. With the resources you find, we saw them collecting iron before. Sealant, we might get some kind of similar crafting system that we got in Fallout 4, where you need to break objects down, or maybe you just need to purchase or find some of these ingredients this time around. They might have done away with the scrapping, as that was very Fallout-esque, using whatever you can to survive. So we'll see how that plays out. But you do have Barrel Mods 2 blocked. Not sure if this is because you have... I'm guessing this is because you haven't researched Barrel Mods 1, and it also doesn't show you what you get for unlocking this. On the side here in the research tree, I do suspect that you can not only do multiple projects as we saw in the previous shot as they approach the crafting station. So you can see that 2 things are actually in progress here. I'm curious as to whether or not it just goes in order so you can kind of set a hierarchy, or if it will research both of these simultaneously. That's something that we'll have to find out later on. I did notice in this shot, again, this is one of the nitpicky things, you could actually see that for some reason, this light source back here, if we sort of play it at just frame by frame, you can see it just randomly jumps around there. If we play it, there you go, it moved again. Not sure what might be causing that to flicker back and forth, but there you go. We have a Combatech Eon pistol here. You could even say made by Jemison? Made on Jemison, so where the equipment was actually created, which is pretty cool. I wonder if all of these are going to have the same planet, or if it will actually be different planets that you get to see where the same weapon. You might have this pistol, but this one was made on another planet and thus has different stats, or a different color, different aesthetic. That would be really neat, and honestly, I would love to see that large of a variety in weapons. But we do get to see the customization. So you see that they added a extended magazine as well as a sight. This is a bit curious to me, because here we get to see what I suspect is another bug. Now, there's also a landmark down on this compass. This one looks like a bit of... Oh, sorry. Apologize for that. This one looks like a bit of a mountain range, although I couldn't quite tell. I've tried to align it to kind of a darker background. Maybe it's a heartbeat of some kind, meaning a pop-up thing. Again, not 100%. It does look a bit like a heartbeat. You also have diseased creatures. Moving on from there, diseased creatures. This one is level 12, and I suspect there's no real visual difference between the creatures, unfortunately. However, what I will say is that he's probably either a stronger or a weaker version of these other sirens, and they are named different things. This is not a status effect. A little bit of a bug that I noticed is you do have a 27 showing on the gun and a 26 here. Even after he finishes firing, it just seems to be like one bullet behind. He's not firing here, but it says 24 versus 25. And there, once again, you do get a little bit of that stagger that we saw previously. And there's your normal siren. Metropis Floater and Diseased Metropis Floater. This is actually one of the only looks we get at weather effects as well. I'm really curious to see the variety of weather, especially on some of these planets where I think certain planets rain diamonds. So it's going to be pretty neat to see what kinds of things that they decide to come up with. We also have a variety of planets I am taking note of here. This is a little bit too far. So you have Latana 3. The planet beforehand is going to be... Alpha on Droste 2. So all different planets, and also the time of day on these planets based on how much is highlighted. An angler hexapod creature located on the planet Moloch 1. And he's actually using a different weapon here. It is an AR-99. cool looking Allied armament. So love the variety. In this segment, we get to look our first look at settlement building. You can see the gravity is 0.91. We are on Vectera, the moon. The scan range is back to 50 meters. Again, that weird bug that we saw before. And some of the similar elements as we're pulling up that similar heads-up display with a little marker right there. Again, hard to discern exactly what these markers are. I thought it was weird that it said 100%, yet this bar wasn't completely full. So that was a bit interesting, but we could see here, this relates to the 9 out of 9 is complete, the current biome 100%. They place their beacon. You have an outpost integrity, so when creatures come and try to attack it, you have a cargo limit, you have a crew limit, or the amount of crew that you have, the amount of power that you have, and the amount of production that it is creating. You can also toggle your view, which we're going to see later on. The ability to name your outpost is probably an embedded feature as well. As you can see down here, it's Vectera Outpost 1.
You can build your own outposts.
In the next shot, it changes to Collins Outpost. So I do believe that you'll be able to name the outpost that you want. This is a variant to, or a different mode that you can select, and you can actually go to modify mode here. There's a button prompt for it, and toggle view over here. I really do like that they have a dedicated building mode, and the way that it snaps around some of these pods, the way that it's prefabricated for you to just put down, makes the settlement building as opposed to having to do individual walls, which may be an option. It may be an option. You might be able to do that. We don't get to see too many of the structures, but I do like that they have these prefabricated that you can then most likely interior decorate if you get out of this mode and go into the first person mode. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 different types of components that you could build. This is only the structures menu. I assume that there'll be similar categories to what we saw in Fallout 4, like power, decorations, miscellaneous, among many others.
Act as a home away from home for survival.
This, I suspect this is an Axion Energy antenna, but they do mention, Todd Howard says, how you can recruit, or hire NPCs to come to your colonies. I also believe that this serves as a recruitment beacon. These are power generators. We'll see a couple instances of those. We're still on Vectera, and you could tell that each one generates 8 power based on the 8 here.
You can choose where and how to build each one, and you can hire characters you meet to keep it up and running.
A little robot, and I'm sure this was decorated manually by the player.
But that's not all.
This is one of my favorite shots. Now, I suspect that this over here on the side is actually a companion from the Constellation faction, although we don't really get that great of a look at him. It might be even, it's possible it is that gentleman that we saw in the front. This guy right here, if you could see him kind of in the scroll bar on the bottom. It's possible that it's him. You can see missiles on the side here. Great. And I wanted to stop and just take notice. I wanted everybody to take notice, really, of the sense of scale between the ship to the player character, which I absolutely love. Things are bigger. Things are more impressive to look at. So the sense of scale is absolutely incredible with the buildings, with the ships, with the environments. It's awesome. There's a lot to dissect here. There's a big question as to whether or not these come sort of pre-decorated, pre-furnished based on the things that you put up. For example, if I put down this module of my ship, and am I automatically going to see this picture of Vasco, these patches on the side here, right? This table is always going to be here. That kind of thing. The interior customization is yet to be seen. I do hope that there's some availability of it, however. Even things like the cockpit can be different, and once again, every single display on each of these monitors is completely different. The attention, man. The attention! There's multiple scientists. You can recruit crew to come work on your ship. And actually, is this based on the division they're assigned to? Once again, all different monitors. I mean, now we might be starting to see some repetition between the environments. Like if we go back to the SysDef room, there might be some similar ones. But as far as just what's in front of you, not sure if this is just because they're in the science lab, or if you could actually tell your crew what outfit to wear as though they have a uniform. But that would be kind of neat. Either way is pretty cool, but it's, again, just, I keep saying this word detail over and over, and on the backboard here it says, I love space. We all do. We all love space, especially after seeing this game. Great monitors. They're actually doing things around the ship. We don't yet know exactly what role they play. I did notice that in this short scene, For example, this person might just be monitoring. Maybe she's sleeping. She does turn around, actually, so she's awake. I guess that doesn't mean she's necessarily awake, but she's not interacting with the keyboard. Might just be monitoring, but just something I noticed. So you do have... I've been trying to dissect this menu, and this honestly I think could be a video on its own, but you do have a various amounts of things in the bottom. We'll start from the top left, however. So you do have weapon 0, weapon 1, weapon 2. So you can have up to 3 weapons on your ship. And then from here you have energy, shields, or engines, excuse me, shields, and gravity, what I assume. Not sure what you need to have the gravity on, but then you have your total reactor power, how much power you can spend in each of these categories. This will come into play actually when we get into the first spaceflight scene in the game. On the bottom here, you can see the name of the ship is Frontier. And you can see the cost of the ship. This vendor is selling it to you for 400,000 credits. So I hope credits are pretty available in the game in order to have a bunch of ships. It's not confirmed whether you can have multiple or not. I think that part of me believes that you'll have only one ship because they want you to really identify with it. But it would be cool to have different vessels. And you can own different homes in past Bethesda games. So I want to say it's likely. Depends on what kind of vibe they're going for. On the bottom here, you have laser weapons, ballistic weapons, missile weapons, your hull integrity, how much damage you could take, your shield maximum, your cargo maximum, how much stuff you can store on your ship. I do like that. The amount of crew that you can have, which changes based on the parts that you select. I think the cockpit, this in particular, I believe is looking at just this section of the ship. So this section can have 2, but that honestly confuses me a bit because the rest of these have to deal with the entire ship as a whole. So again, some of this is confusing me a little bit. And then you could also raise and lower it on this segment. So I thought it would lock in, but it seems as though you can actually go to different parts or different points and move them up or down. It might be maybe like the engines here. You can stack 2 engines. So if you choose to move it up or down, might be like that, raise or lower. Not quite sure, but it does seem as though there's these lock-on points. Again, based on what you do, you could actually see in red how things change the mass of the ship, the top speed of the ship, the jump range that you have. And each of these parts actually have different companies that they come from. You can really feel immersed in this world as if everything could actually exist. The cost, the mass, based on the mass and the benefits that it gives you, obviously increases the cost. Lower mass, more benefits, higher cost.
There's loads of different modules,
One of the things that I thought was really, really cool here is that you actually have 14 different customizable parts in the ship. As you notice, he'll scroll through a little bit. Maybe if we go back a few frames, you'll actually see that he's currently on this section here. If we do happen to move back, he goes to reactors, which is this one over here. So it makes sense because he's scrolling to the left. So there's 14 different parts that you have control over on the ship. Now the chassis of the ship, the main build of the ship, is probably going to be different models. So you'll see like this one is an explorer vehicle, this one is a cargo vehicle, that kind of thing. I imagine that the base of the ship, and then you build these 14 parts off of whatever base you're using, and different companies will sell different things. New Atlantis here, this changes based on where I'm not sure if this is where the ship was made or where the part that you have selected is coming from. This ship is called the Longsword 1, so absolutely you'll be able to customize your ship. They don't show what the warning is, but I also do like that you can completely have full control over the color.
I have to say, it's so cool. We just absolutely love this.
There's so many different designs and so many different types of ships and parts that you can have. They really did not hold back for this section. As we get into space, you can actually see, if you watch closely, this bar goes down as the player here decides to put a lot of his energy into, this is going to be ballistic weapons. So you could see that you have the max, you see it going down as he distributes his power in each of these sections. Now, the way flying works, you also have on the bottom left here, you do have your hull integrity as well as your shield maximum. You can see how powerful your shields are. I guess maybe these go down based on if you're taking damage, but not quite sure on that one. Supposedly, from what I've heard, I've never played the game, but the ship combat handles a lot more like Wing Commander than it does a realistic flight sim, which I don't think anybody was truly expecting a realistic flight sim. But that's completely okay. You can see when you're toggling your thrusters for a little bit of a speed boost, you have your balance here, or I'm sorry, your ballistic weapons here, your missiles, and your lasers. I keep wanting to think this is balance. It's not, it's ballistics. as a player uses some. One thing I did not notice was fuel. So a big discussion was, do you have to fuel up? Doesn't seem like it. It seems like that's something that is not a factor here. You don't have to pay to refuel your ships, but it's nice to see all these dynamic elements on the bottom, from target lock, so there is a locking system. You don't have to manually aim everything. There's also this here, this dock option, so there is a passive way to board ships, and we do see that. It's not clear, maybe they surrender to you through some sort of comm system and then you could raid them. Maybe you can disable parts of the ship. It would be cool, like power armor, the way power armor in Fallout 4 got blown off, if you could actually disable parts of the ship. So you take their engine, then you board them, then you could scrap everything inside, and you do have an indicator where other enemy ships are. You can also see that they're locked onto you, so you do get an indication of that. Explosions in space, probably not the most realistic thing, but this is a fictional sci-fi game, so we're gonna let it pass. You do see them explode in glory as they go down. No opportunity to board that one probably anymore. I'm curious to see how much there is to do. We do see the player approaching a ship that you can dock on, a space station that we're coming towards now. So there are things out there. Curious as to how they'll be shown on your map and how they'll be shown in the world, like how you're able to discover them in the world. One thing that I did notice is there's actually really no reaction. So these shots hit and then these shots hit, and you do see little flashes. It looks like it's getting absorbed by shields, so there is a shield effect. But this first shot here lands, and then it's several frames. By the time both shots, that's when you get the two kind of shieldy effects going on. So just something I noticed. Well, most of the shots in this sequence seem like they were really dynamic and they were right on the mark. This one, no. You do have the option to board enemy ships. So we saw that before, and now you have it. And you can see exactly what systems they have online. So that way you don't have to just guess. You can see their flight systems on standby, their weapon system, and their light support system. So you might not want to board if their light support is offline. Again, the variety of different ships that you're able to see is pretty incredible, I have to be honest. They did not hold back on the ship customization. I can't believe how long this has been going on, but we're now getting into the actual procedural generation part of the gameplay demo. So he does mention you can land anywhere on the planet. He says specifically you can go to New Atlantis on the planet Jemison or anywhere on the planet. So I know it's weird that this kind of stays here as this pans to the side, but I will say that I do think that it's confirmed that you can land anywhere. You can also scan the planet, so I don't think you need to land on a planet to see what is going to be there. You can use the scan section to see if there's any valuable resources or if there's any points of interest on the planets. You also have this show me button, so you probably have some kind of probe or camera that's able to scan the planet's surface. What I thought was interesting was this button here, clear route. So one of the big questions, I'm actually just going to switch my screens here as I talk over this one for a bit. But one of the big questions is whether or not you need to do the manual flying, whether you have to go from planet to planet, and if there's an option, what the option to fast travel might look like. Now, something that nobody has really picked up on, you're hearing it here first, folks, is the fact that you do actually have that little section there, that clear route. So not only do I think that travel between them is possible, I think you can actually map out the order that you go to them. So you can turn around and say, all right, I'm going to go to the planet Jemison, and then I'm going to go to another planet somewhere over here and another planet. And not only do you not need to do the piloting, probably Vasco does it for you, or the crew members that you can hire. Not only do they do it for you, but you can actually just choose. So that way, as soon as you get back on the ship, you tell the crew, hey, we're ready to launch. And then they'll take off and they'll go to the next one without you having to plan out exactly what route or exactly every single time you want to do. So if you see a series of quests that you might want to participate in, for example, you have multiple quest markers in this system. So you might say, okay, let's go here, then here, then here. I want to do all of it. So you choose, you set your route, and then it will take you to each of them. That You heard it here first, folks. You can see how many planets and how many moons each of those planets have. Now, he refers to the fact that there's thousands of planets, but you can see here that the moons themselves are actually landable. In fact, the gameplay demo opened up with the player on a moon, not on an actual planet. So, he says thousands of planets. I think maybe it was a bit of a misspeaking. He also meant there's thousands of places you can go to, thousands of locations you can visit. You'll notice that it's 16% filled in so far. Not sure what most of these markers are. You have what looks like a satellite here, a ship here, another ship over here. These might refer to settlements. One of these two is Jemison. I think this one here is Jemison, where New Atlantis is located. So it might mean that this is a major settlement, in which case the United Colonies, because we could see here that it's controlled by the United Colonies, controls A, the system, but B, they have established outposts on each of these 3 planets. Now, the only thing that makes me question that, we'll see a bit later, or actually in just a little bit. But again, hard to discern what these systems are. So you can land anywhere on the target. My guess, again, is that it's not manual landing. You just select a destination. If there was some kind of takeoff sequence where it's direct ground to air seamlessly, I would imagine that's something you want to show off during your big debut, because that's an impressive feature. So I suspect that it's not actually one. Again, you have the scan function. This exclamation mark might mean there's something to scan, possibly, that you didn't yet find everything on the planet. So curious how that plays up, but I don't know why just this little exclamation mark would be here, and it wouldn't just say scan on this side, right? Because people read left to right. And then you can set landing target. So I think that wherever in this area you choose to put your cursor, the game will automatically find a reasonable landing spot for you in that location. Now, you do have a variety of planets. You have your dead planets, and you have your Goldilocks planets. Your barren planets, your dead planets, it will specifically say there's no fauna, there's no flora, but you go here to mine resources, and this is a moon of the planet Olivis, so we actually get to see. This is the planet Gagarin, I believe, and this one is a Goldilocks world, and you actually see 2 markers. So remember before we saw kind of the thing that I was speculating was, hey, there might be a base on this planet or some kind of settlement or faction settlement. I'm not quite 100% on that. Again, it's hard to figure out exactly what these might be. Here, can't quite tell what this symbol is, but it might be like maybe a skyscraper. It might be one of the symbols we saw before that kind of is like alien artifact or something looking. You have a structure here that kind of looks like an archway. So not quite sure exactly what it is. But again, if you think it's worth exploring, there's a satellite, but I think that's on the other planet. If you do believe that it's worth exploring, you can use that show me option when you hover over it, and then you can see exactly what it is. And I think this is where the handcrafted locations are going to be. So you find, you have your moon places, and those maybe have a couple locations if they're Goldilocks worlds or Goldilocks moons, so to speak. The dead worlds, I imagine, exist solely for exploration and resource gathering and nothing else, and I believe that will make up the majority of planets in the game, if I'm being honest. Like, if there's 1,000 planets, maybe 700 of them will just be barren wastelands. If you think, 1 to 2 structures per Goldilocks planet, that gives you approximately, let's say there's maybe 200 Goldilocks planets in the game, so that will give you approximately 200 to 400-ish locations. Now, Skyrim had over 200 dungeons, a little bit over 200 dungeons you could go to. So within the realm of 200 Goldilocks planets, each with about one, again, average of 1 structure on them or handmade location, seems a bit reasonable. Although I'm curious to see what you guys think about that one. A little UI bug that I also noticed as they come out of this, and we really do have to take this frame by frame, but take a look at kind of this survey meter here. I believe it's in this segment as we go closer. We do got to skip ahead in order to see it. Again, you don't notice this. This is one of those things you really don't notice during normal gameplay. In fact, if you play it at full speed, you can't see it. But notice how this survey box doesn't go away. While the rest of the box does kind of disappear organically. This, even crunches down and then sort of dissipates. But this one just stays and lingers, and then eventually it just, poof, gone. So, a little bit of a UI bug. Hopefully that one is easy to fix, and hell, if the developers come across this video, it's going to be stupid long. But if you guys come across this, there you go. There's over 100 systems to explore. We have a couple named ones that you could see. Again, I think this symbol means that there's sentient life in these systems. So you're looking at all of these. They don't have names. Jaffa, Voli, Cheyenne don't have sentient life in them. These might just be exploration. Another way to kind of guide you, the player, from going into every single system that's there. You can set your course. I think setting course as opposed to the route that you had before. That it was weird that that was the only time you saw it in the screenshot or the section over Jemison. But you can't seem to plot your course elsewhere. However, here on the Sol system, you have obviously Earth and human settlements that are probably going to be there, or early human settlements. Not sure if you can go to Earth. I'm guessing no. Alpha Centauri, you have the location of the New Atlantis settlement. So I think that's what this symbol means, but I'm not sure. I do like that you can see the number of planets and number of moons, and you can see this window here, though, before you enter the system. There are a couple more shots that we have here that really just do a great job of showcasing the diversity. Again, you do, in a lot of these shots, you really get to see the fact that there is nothing around, just absolutely nothing. Yes, this is a great place. You have these 4 power generators that are here, but again, I think those are just rocks. Maybe that's a structure over there. I'm just hoping, my big hope is that the structures are A, pretty expansive, B, a lot of them have creatures like this, and C, the locations are diverse. So we're seeing a lot of diversity here, but how much does that carry over, I think, is most people's concerns. Am I going to go to some of those really dead planets and just find absolutely nothing all the time, or am I going to go to some of these Goldilocks worlds and I'm going to see these trees on a dozen of them? Easter egg to the Mars rover. Again, just pure emptiness. I don't see any signs of structures, comparatively to some other Bethesda games where you can't not see something to go to. Here, it's hard to see something to go to. So there you go. But they are beautiful. They are diverse. I'm hoping to see things that are a bit more alien. You can see a lot of them are pretty close to home, other than the creatures. I love the creature design, but a lot of it is pretty, especially that one. That one's Mars. But a lot of them are a bit close to home. So hopefully, well, it makes sense that biology develops in a similar way in some cases. Hopefully we get to see some big alien environments, like those crystal ones that we saw earlier in this exact sequence. Some more rare creatures that you got going on. There's actually 3 different ones in this shot. Boom, boom, boom. And of course, the landscape of where Elder Scrolls 6 takes place, as we all know. Very tropical, very lush. Again, no real pop-in with this segment, right? You look to the horizon, you don't see the trees just popping into existence, which is absolutely excellent. Not sure what you possibly want to explore here. Maybe there's something underground, but... And then again, I do feel as though this is evidence of... it's because of this cutscene makes me think that it's non-manual takeoff. You do get a cutscene of taking off, and then you yourself are in space. Just my guess, but we'll see if I'm wrong. Thank you guys so much for watching through this entire thing. I know this was a long one, but I hope that you found some valuable information out of it, because this is as in-depth as I think anybody's going to get. I hope you felt the time watching this was informative and valuable and not wasted. And if you enjoyed, please do subscribe to the channel for more Starfield content. I really do appreciate it, trying to hit that 1K mark. And as always, I hope to see you all next time. So long, everybody.